and welcome to Inequality Talks, a podcast from the volunteers of Mellemfolkeligt Samvirke, Aarhus. This episode is a live recorded interview with meteorologist Jesper Theilgaard and climate activist from Tanzania, Happy Itros. This interview was part of the Climate Justice Days. Hi everybody, thanks for coming. Yes, we have a really exciting event today. Thank you all for joining. My name is Elise. I'm going to be moderating this interview today with Jesper Theilgaard and Happy Itros, who is joining us online. So as all of you, I'm sure, are aware, this is an event which is part of the Climate Justice Days. In Mellemfolkeligt Samvirke, both in Aarhus and in Copenhagen. And, why are we here? Just a little reminder. We have a climate crisis. As we could see this year already, we've had heat waves across Europe and the US and Australia, flash floods in Pakistan, India. And, we'll get into that. So we're here today because we're facing a climate crisis. And the effects of climate change will be felt disproportionately by those who are least responsible for it. So that's the climate justice aspect of it. And we are here today to speak to Jesper Theilgaard, who has, as I'm sure many of you recognize him as the weatherman, Danish weatherman, the Danish weatherman. He's been reporting on weather for 40 years. He worked at the Danish Meteorologist Institute. He's recently written a book and published a book called Det danske vejr. Yeah?
Third edition.
Third edition, yes. The first was 2006, right? Happy Itros is a climate activist from Tanzania. She has worked with the global actions platform. Yes, I've written it down. Is that correct? Global platforms Tanzania. Sorry. And also works a lot with gender issues and women empowerment. And yeah, we're gonna learn so much from our guests today, our experts here in climate change and climate justice. So let's give a big, warm welcome to our guests today. Okay, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Climate change. We all know it's happening. We're not going to have that conversation here today. But let's get a little bit more of the scientific background of climate change. And Jesper Theilgaard, you've been communicating about climate change for many years now. I want to ask you first how that has been for you, this personal journey.
A long, slowly movement. First of all, I was recognizing climate change already back in the 80s and 90s. And at that time I began working on television in 1990. And at that time, no one agreed that there was a climate issue here developing. The funny thing is that we had the election in 2019, and I met our new, the Prime Minister, which we have today, Mette Frederiksen. I met her at the election time, and the first thing she said to me was that 25 years ago, you was the first guy who mentioned climate change, that it would be a big issue. And I couldn't help saying, why didn't you do anything?
I told you so.
Yeah, so, precisely. So it has been a long way, but nowadays everyone, I guess, recognizing that climate change is happening. We can see it across the world, we can see it happening, and especially in the vulnerable countries where they have done almost nothing for it, but they are facing big challenges. So climate change is here, and we need to act. We have said that many years, and we have to continue saying it.
Thank you. So maybe we could get a little bit more of the scientific information about what is the significance of the 1.5 degrees Celsius, and perhaps talk a little bit about tipping points and what they are.
First of all, the 1.5 degrees was a part of the Paris Agreement. First time it was mentioned actually was in Copenhagen 2009, but in 2015 at COP21, when we had the Paris Agreement, it was written down. But we haven't done enough to reach 1.5 or to stop the increasing in temperature with 1.5 degrees. So that is out of question. Maybe if we are lucky and we are doing enough, we maybe can do 2 degrees. But now, as we are going today, we are facing 2.8 or 3 degrees. So that is the main thing. Secondly, the consequences which you are mentioning, the tipping points, which are a variety of tipping points around the globe, the rainforest, the ice caps, the Gulf Stream. There's so many things which are going to happen faster and faster when we are going to reach these tipping points. And well, I read an article a few days ago from Will Steffen from Australia, and he said that he thought that we have reached the tipping points already for some parts of these consequences. So what can we do? We can only do one thing, mentioning decreasing the emission of greenhouse gases, because that is the reason. So we need to have much more action on the climate issue on the coming COP meeting in Egypt in November. But I'm not so confident. Sorry.
That was one of my questions for you, for both of you. We'll get to asking Happy about climate change in Tanzania, but I have a few questions for Jesper first. So we see the COP27 in Egypt in November, and I wanted to ask you about your confidence level, and you've already answered that question. We've already seen that the IPCC reports that we are headed for 1.1 degrees.
We already have 1.1.
And yes, sorry, and we are headed for 1.5 in 2040.
In a few years.
Yeah.
They are saying now,
Okay.
in 3-5 years, we will reach 1.5, at least at 1 year. Maybe not permanently, but we will reach 1.5.
Yes.
In maybe 3 years.
So when we are building a whole political agenda around this 1.5, how do you personally see this when we look at more realistic projections, which say 2 to 5 degrees Celsius?
When we had the meeting in Glasgow last November, COP26, all the delegates came out after they have signed the document, saying that the story about 1.5 degrees was intact. I wasn't agree, and I found the figures of the emission and what the IPCC are saying. IPCCs are saying in their last report that if we will have a chance to get 1.5, we need to halve the emission until 2030, which is in 8 years from now. And I got the figures, and I could say that that would mean that every country on Earth should have the same agenda and ambition as Denmark. Denmark is set to have one of the biggest ambitions, and all the countries around the globe must do the same. Will that happen? No. So I think they're foolish continue saying that we can reach 1.5. No. It's out of question. We will reach at least 2 degrees if nothing is happening. And I can't see that they will increase their ambition so much in Egypt. The figures I've heard will only be a slight movement.
And already with 1.1 degrees change in global average temperatures, we are already seeing extreme weather events occurring all over the globe. When I was reading about tipping points, I kept hearing about melting of the ice sheets and the dying of the rainforest. I was wondering if you could explain to me how it works with the thawing of permafrost and why that tipping point can contribute to climate change.
Well, on the northern continents, there are areas most to the north which are permanently frozen. It has been there for hundreds of years, and it's obvious that when temperatures are rising, some of these areas will melt or thaw. In this soil, there is organic materials, leaves, and lots of things from organic matters, and they will begin to be rotten, and that will emit methane, and they will emit CO2. So it's just a question how much will there be, and the scientists are not quite in agreement. They're discussing how much is there, will it be a big issue. I got a number from scientists saying that if it's going as we expect from now, it will mean 0.1, 0.2 degrees extra. Okay. So it is an issue, maybe not the bomb, but it is an issue. And it is a tipping point because when these extra greenhouse gases is coming into the atmosphere, the temperature is rising much more, and that will, of course, thaw much more of the permafrost area. So it is intensifying day by day.
Right, and we're reaching these tipping points, which means irreparable damage, things that we cannot go back and fix.
Tipping point is you're passing a line and you can't go back.
Right. Okay. I want to ask Happy, what is climate change looking like in Tanzania? How have you seen the effects of climate change playing out? And what does it mean for specific groups of people?
Wow, this is a very beautiful question. Thank you so much, Elise. I would say the 21st century is one of the eras whereby the effects of climate change have massively displayed to the people. And with the presence of different global disasters, including COVID-19, the Ukraine-Russia war, everything has been going on around the world together with the climate change going on. I think this has severely affected the people in the global south. So as far as Tanzania is concerned, we are facing different risks as far as climate change is concerned. We have high levels of high sea levels rising, but also temperature rising have been one of the issues happening here in Tanzania. So, like what I said before, Tanzania is one of the countries that depends highly on agriculture, but also it depends on tourism as well. So having the impacts of climate change as far as the high levels of temperature and water and sea levels, this means that there is a high risk of the economic system of the country to fall down or to go to a lower level compared to how it's moving in its developmental stages. So we have more than 80% of people in the country who are farmers, and they depend on agriculture, whereby if we have extreme weather events, including drought and flood, this massively means that we will use a lot of energy to mobilize the resources, including water, but also the food insecurity level is going to be high. It's going to be like at risk. That means that the people in the country will also have the risk of like having lower level of income, but also like they'll be having challenges to mobilize their own resources for their own families. Apart from that, we are at a high risk of losing a lot of biodiversity in the country. Like I said before, Mount Kilimanjaro has lost 70% of its ice since 1990. For 32 years now, Mount Kilimanjaro has lost its ice. And in 2011, 17 feet of ice was wiped away. Like, because of climate crisis, a lot has been happening in the country. And as far as we know, Mount Kilimanjaro is the tallest mountain in Africa. It means that it modulates, or it's one of the things that attracts a lot of tourists in the country. So if we're going to lose Mount Kilimanjaro, this has a very huge implication in the country, especially when it comes to the economic system of the country. So I think it's high time that we work for climate crisis and climate change, because the impact is huge and massive, especially to people who are living in extreme poverty. But also something else, because of extreme weather events, I remember recently in April, the end of April, we had massive rains, a lot of floods happening. Thousands of people were displaced because of the floods happening. But also there are some people who their relatives are still missing because of the floods that are happening. The same thing happened in 2020, 2021, same issues are happening. I believe that this is our time. This is the time that we need to stand up and work. And I think the 21st century has severely shown that we are not doing enough. We need to modernize and innovate our ways in order to help the community, holding accountable the global north in order to help the local communities in the global south. Thank you.
One question for me, Happy. You mentioned Kilimanjaro and the ice on the top. How much are the people depending on fresh water from Kilimanjaro?
I would say a lot of people depend. We have even a bottle brand called Kilimanjaro. It's one of the most famous resorts in the country. Like I can say, we have retail sellers and wholesale sales. So these people depend highly on this, on selling these bottles of water.
And one more thing, you said that it's time to act, and I highly agree. And I have to say also that it is a bit too late. We cannot avoid temperature rising from now on. The only thing we can do is mitigate so much that the temperature will stabilize, maybe in 20, 30, 40 years. So what will happen to drought, to flooding, to more climate change, it will just continue. So we have to do two things at a time: mitigate and adapt.
Yeah, I think that is one of the powerful things. I agree with you so much. When it comes to floods, sometimes you could ask yourself, why are people living in areas that are prone to floods here in Tanzania? But then, people cannot afford living in good houses because of poverty. We have people that are living under $1 per day, and they depend on that amount, less than $2. They depend on that amount to put food on the table for their kids. And then you tell this person they have to move to a better or higher place or not a better place of living. So I think this brings a greater implication to the community that as far as we want to mitigate or we want to control the damage that has been caused in the country, I still think we have a better shot at holding accountable the greater north, the north countries or the global north countries in order to help the local community.
Happy, you were just talking about the existing inequalities which exacerbate how climate change affects people. You were also doing a seminar, was it yesterday? No, 2 days ago in ecofeminist leadership. And you talked a little bit about the gendered impacts of climate change in Tanzania. Do you think you could spend a few minutes discussing what that actually means?
Yeah, sure. As far as the gender issue is concerned in the country, first and foremost, women, we have a lot of women in the country. Women are more than 50% of the whole population in Tanzania. So with the rise of climate crisis, this gives us a different perspective when it comes to the impact of climate crisis on women. And most of the women, 70% of them, live in extreme poverty situation. And in this extreme poverty situation, these women are given gender roles that they're expected to be home keepers of the house, but also to mobilize different activities in their local communities. And some of the women, I'll say more than 60% of them, are involved in farming activities. So having the rise of climate crisis or the impact of climate crisis gives us a different perspective that there are going to be scarcity of natural resources, which means water, land, and food security. And this has a different implication as well. When you talk about lack of, water, land, and food security, this means we are implying there are some people who can use to their advantage, to control these resources, and then some of the gender-based violence cases can enter through that. We are talking about somebody asking for sexual favors in order to help a woman acquire land. We are talking about a woman who doesn't have knowledge regarding the issues of climate crisis, regarding the issues of, all the resources, food security. We are talking about a woman who lacks water in her place in order to help her children at home. So this woman needs to travel to different longer distances in order to get water. And this woman needs to return home to put the food on the table. And we are talking about people who are living in extreme poverty, facing circumstances that are beyond themselves. So I think with the increase in climate crisis, different gender-based violence cases are going to increase, including domestic violence, sexual corruption, but also psychological torture can also increase because of gender-based violence. So I think we should not take this we should cover this, or we should view the climate crisis in a 360 perspective. That what are the issues that may arise out of the crisis that has happened, out of the impacts that have been prevailing in the community, taking into account that most of the community still live in extreme poverty.
Only a question. I was just wondering, what are the men doing? Aren't they helping getting the water, or are they just sending the women out?
So I would say the Tanzanian culture is a little bit different in that sense. We have men who are really good, and we have women who lead families as well. I'm not saying 100% of men are doing bad things, but most of the people, especially living in the rural areas, still are having struggle. They still struggle with a lot of gender-based violence cases. People who are living in an urban area who have that awareness that there is women empowerment, equality, women can still lead, women need education, women need all this, they're doing great. But then what about the people living in rural areas that still do not have the knowledge that these things are happening? There are people who still do female genital mutilation. And then there are people who are like, I married you, you're supposed to stay at home and cook for the kids. This is your role. If you're not going to do it, then you're not a good wife. Then the community gives you a certain kind of naming, or it labels you in a certain kind of way that you're not a good woman, and not a good wife, not a good mother, something like that. So I would say it's all about the cultural perspective that is prevailing in the country, especially in the places whereby people do not have the knowledge. And different youth-led organizations, women-led organizations are doing their best in the country in order to reach out to so many communities, especially in the rural areas, to educate the communities. Recently, we had a case whereby a young lady, this happened the same week, this week as we are finishing this week, I would say, there's a young lady in one of the regions who was beaten, severely beaten by the husband. And this young lady is 18 years old. She's married to a man who is domestically abusing her. And also, the current case that we have seen, I think it's Iran or Iraq, I don't remember, the woman that was killed by the police because she didn't wear the hijab. She did not wear the hijab.
Iran.
Yeah, Iran, yeah. She did not wear the hijab well. I think that is toxic. There's some cultures that are very toxic to the community, that are killing women. And then if we put the climate crisis on top of their head again, I think we are creating more damage to the community, especially the next generation of women and men coming through. So if we have good men around here, and I believe we have good people, good men, good women who are, who campaign for equality, gender rights, empowerment of women, I think I'm giving you big ups and congratulations for continuing to support women and continuing to empower them to to speak up and say their problems and to put them on the table and to support them throughout their challenges. Yeah.
So you are saying that a change of culture is a part of the solution of the climate change?
Yeah.
So we'll actually get to talking about climate justice, what we can do about it later on. But it's very interesting to hear your perspective. Obviously, as somebody who works towards women and girl empowerment, this is a very important part of the climate justice movement. And it all climate justice requires that we recognize that climate change affects women and girls disproportionately in a lot of global south countries. So we've talked a bit about Tanzania, what's going to happen in Tanzania, what's already happening in Tanzania. I should stop saying what's going to happen. What is already happening and going to get worse in Tanzania? I would like to ask Jesper a bit about what will climate change or look like, or what has it looked like in Denmark? Because as I can imagine, it will be quite different.
Yeah, somehow different, but also the same. Because what a higher temperature means is that we have much more evaporation. The soil will be more dry. Much more water vapor in the atmosphere, which meaning that there will be much more precipitation, and the precipitation will be stronger, harsh, and maybe also longer rain periods. So it is a change, and in the climate and in the weather, and I think that is very, very important to state that what is happening globally now is a change of how we have built our societies everywhere, in Denmark, in Tanzania, in South Africa, South America, and so on. Everywhere we have built our societies on the back of the climate. A certain temperature, a certain amount of precipitation, seasons, and so on. And when it is changing, which it is everywhere, then we have to change our societies. We have to change agriculture. We have to change our infrastructure. We have to change how to live in this new weather situation. And here in Denmark, we have had lots more flash floods. We have drought. We have, of course, higher temperatures and a change of agriculture. We have other species in our waters and in the forest, and insects, birds, and so on. And so we can see nature is changing, and it will continue to change. So what we are doing is changing our infrastructure so we can handle the water. That is rising seawater, as you have in Tanzania. We have the showers, the thunderstorms, which are stronger, and we have the groundwater, which is rising. So we have water from above, from the side, and from beneath, and we have to cope with it. And we are lucky here in Denmark that we are rich, and we can do these things. We can change the infrastructure. We can build dikes towards the sea, and I'm quite aware that that's not the case in everywhere on Earth. So we know that a lot of people are more in vulnerable countries where you don't have the money. You may have expertise to do it, but if you don't have the money, you cannot adapt. So that is, I think, a part of. I know we are going to talk about climate justice later, but it's a part of it. The responsibility of help each other, because if we are not helping each other, the crisis will change from a climate crisis to a social crisis to neighboring crisis to conflicts, and we don't want that. We have enough conflicts already, so that's a part of it.
Right. So when people say, "Oh, climate change means nice summers in Denmark, and now we can produce wine," you say, "Wait a second, let me just get Jesper Theilgaard to explain this to you." Okay, so I think now for the most important part of the discussion, which is climate justice, I would like to ask Happy if you could maybe talk a little bit about Okay, in your ideal climate justice perfect world, what would it look like? What would climate justice mean for the political sphere, the economic sphere, the individual sphere?
Wonderful, thank you so much. So in my ideal that I dream about or that I believe we can reach, I see us in living in an environment where we respect each other, because I term climate justice as a sense of respect for others. Because the fact that we have respect for others, it's easier for us to care and know that we need not to, to invest in fossil fuel, because there are some other nations that are going to go through, other severe consequences because of what we can do. So I believe a perfect world, or a world that we have climate justice, involves respect for each other, but also it involves different countries coming together in order to help the global health. For example, including them in the climate financing, a lot of financing that can help them mitigate and adapt to the climate consequences that they are facing because of what has been caused. But also something else that we are still missing is highly involving them in making decisions in different meetings, in different decision making processes in order to help these local communities. So I think the term, the ideal perfect world of climate justice involves us respecting each other, but also being accountable, or having leaders who are accountable. At most of the time, in this climate injustice situation, those who have a voice, especially in the COP or the places that we are making decisions, that's what I'm saying. Those who have power, the voice, are the ones that are those who have money, have the funds. They're the ones who can say something, and that can be mobilized. But then these people who who have less power and less income, they can say something. Yes, it's taken into account, but then it's not really implemented in the actual social environments or communities. So I think a perfect ideal world is a world where we respect each other, but also we take into account the decisions, but also the ideas of these people living in the local communities, include them in the decision-making process, and not only including them in the decision-making process, including and doing what they have said, like making them feel heard and implementing it, actually taking into accountability every aspect. For example, if they need the funding and then you have phrased that you're going to give them the funding, then I believe that implementing that and promoting this funding, to all these global health countries is something that is very perfect. But also having that continuous sense of support, because as far as Tanzania is concerned, yes, we receive the funding, but then the funding is not continuous. It comes in packages, in seasons, and that makes us not to have that continuous sense of flow of development, but also of ways that we can use to mitigate, but also adapt to the climate changing situation all over the world. So I think we still need to make that a movement, or we still to work on that. So that's what the perfect ideal world would be like. Not perfect, but at least
it's a start
to that level. Yeah.
Yes. So you mentioned a really many important things there. Funding mitigation, funding also green energy instead of investing in fossil fuel. In the fossil fuel industry, which we see private banks doing and central banks supporting, making those loans very secure. And a fundamental respect for each other, and then I want to go back to this point you made about inclusion in decision-making processes, because right now it's my own opinion that the international governance bodies are a hegemony of the richest, most powerful countries. And how do global South countries then unite to become a unified force against the most polluting, most powerful countries?
Wow, that's a very good question. Thank you so much. I honestly think we need to put aside our cultures, like our differences, especially in the global south. We need to work on, putting aside everything that makes us, we have different cultures, different backgrounds. For us to be able to really address the impacts of climate crisis, we need to come together and work in solidarity, but also have joint activism in holding accountable the countries, especially the countries in the global north. So I think what the global south needs in order to make this possible, first and foremost, I believe information is very powerful. I usually say that if somebody does not have information, then it's easier to manipulate you. So if you do not have information, like the actual real information, it's easier for somebody to lie to you, to manipulate you, and to like use that to his or her advantage. So I believe having information is the powerful key. Some of the people in the global south still do not have information about climate crisis, and some of them still think it's something that is cliche. Maybe the whole world is talking about it, but it's not really what is happening in the world. Like, what are these people saying? I think they're using gas money, all that stuff, because they do not really understand what is going on. But I believe information is very powerful, so we need to create more awareness to the community. And when the community is empowered with education, then together we can come around and find ways on how best we can hold accountable these people we have through our own governments, our own local government, to like remind them, like, you guys, we need this to be done, and you people, you have power, you can speak up, you can do all those stuff that you're doing in order to provide the funding. But also, apart from that, we can use our own social platform. So I think powerful tools like technology tools have helped us, to get to that level of knowing that.
I quite agree that information and education is a keystone for the future. Educating the young people in school, but I would like to ask how do you see the information go around the country? Can you use television? Will that be a possibility? I can tell you that I've tried a lot of times here in Denmark to make programs or to be able to educate and give information about climate change. It was very, very, very difficult. In the first 15 years I was on TV, I wasn't allowed to talk about climate change.
Wow.
In the last 10 years or 12 years I was on TV, it became better. But how is it in Tanzania?
Maybe we have a new Tanzania weatherman.
Yeah. We never know. You are 100 times and 1,000 times welcome. I would love to have you.
See you.
Yeah. Sure. I would say in Tanzania we do have weather. People talk about weather, but then they do not relate it to climate. So what we do, for example, where I work at Global Platform Tanzania, we have been able to move into different regions to educate them, especially those regions that are highly affected because of climate change. We have the coastal region, one place called Mafia Island, but also the Kilwa, that is in the southern part of Tanzania as well. So in this particular region, we had an earth movement. We protested, we had an earth movement that we spoke to the people, especially those who were cutting down mangrove trees illegally. So we had this act movement. We were mobilizing people, educating them that, you do this is what is going to happen, a lot of floods, we have risk and all that stuff that is happening. But also, we have been able to use our own arts and our own cultural activities in order to educate the community regarding climate change. That's what we have been doing, using songs, using art exhibition. But then, the more you need to mobilize people, the more you need to do activism, you need the funding. So we do not reach that huge amount of people that we want to reach because we cannot afford to go to that level. So we do it when we get the funding. We again go and educate the community. So I think these are things that we need to work as a country in order to make it more open to the people. But also, as far as the question is concerned, Mr. Jesper, I think we still need to educate the community. Then it's easier for these people to even understand the injustice that happens as far as the climate change is concerned. So it's easier for them to hold accountable the bigger nations.
You mentioned one very good thing, which I'm doing also. Art is could be a very, very big issue here. People look at art in different way than if you're coming with figures. I'm doing climate concerts and I'm doing speeches with art festivals. When you talk about climate change, you very often use figures and graphs and so on, and it can be bored for some people, and they don't understand what you're saying. But if you're doing music or literature or something, you get into the ears in different and the brain in different way.
I think it's very powerful, like what you say, like it has proven for sure. Like the more we use art, it portrays the message in a different way and an easier way for people to understand it in their own perspective, especially if we use the cultural, practices in that particular way. So we have like traditional languages in the country. So like different regions have their own traditional languages. So if you portray the songs or maybe the drama in that particular area, in that perspective, in that traditional language, it's easier for people to understand, like, oh, this is how it relates to this, or this is how it's happening. And we could see the impact, the different impacts in that. So I think we should also like try to find ways on how we can generate our own income in order to help the local community while we are striking, while we are voicing our sound, or we are voicing ourselves up to the global north, especially the countries who are responsible for climate change, to finance the project, to finance people, especially for the loss and damage that is happening in the country. Yeah, I'll say so.
I wanted to mention a few things. First, you just mentioned loss and damage. I don't know if how many people are aware of this, but Denmark has just now become the first UN member state to pay some countries in the Sahel in Africa loss and damage, and it's not very much. It's 13.3 million. We can say it's not that much, but it's a big political move and a signal that says, hey, we are responsible and we need to pay. And so perhaps this can be a beacon of light in the climate justice world. But as you've mentioned so many times now, that we need continuous you need continuous funds to adapt and mitigate climate change, but also ways that you can empower people instead of just becoming dependent on these sources of income and reproducing rather these systems of inequality that we have already. I had another question actually, because we just talked about information and the power of information, and as we know already, oil companies were well aware of their impact of climate change, and as you mentioned, you weren't even allowed to speak about climate change. I can imagine that this was a product of some people in power with money who were controlling. Or do you want to say something to that, and then I'll make my point?
That is more or less a question about the Danish television is funded by the state somehow, and they were afraid that they would get less money if I was talking too much about climate change, because the politicians wasn't in agreement with climate change. There was people saying something that climate change is not done by humans. It's natural. And it's nothing. It means nothing to us. So if I said that it is a very big issue, the television thought that the politicians would be angry, and so therefore it was very, very difficult to talk about climate change at that time.
Yeah, and it was part of. I mean, that's also a product of the whole information campaign that these corporate lobbyists developed to avoid responsibility. So if we're going to talk about climate justice, we've talked a lot about the richest countries that are responsible. I had here a figure that I wanted to read, that just the 23 richest countries, which is 14% of the world's population, have produced 60% of the world's carbon emissions since 1850, which is 40%. That's just one statistic. There could be other measures somewhere else. But I think it's really important in this climate justice discussion to talk about corporate power, because here's another statistic. 122 corporations account for 80% of the carbon emissions. That's from CorpWatch. So a question for both of you. How do we address the challenge of corporate power in achieving climate justice? These are structural economic challenges that there's no easy answer to this question, but what are your thoughts if you'd like to share?
First of all, I think consumers can do a lot here. Consumers can tell the companies that they don't want to buy their stuff if it's not climate friendly, and by that also saying that the companies in some way also are responsible for what has happened, and that is and should be a part of the discussion.
Happy, would you like to add your thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I would like to agree with Jesper that consumers have power as well to address the corporate powers of the corporate people. But also my thoughts would go better to the government stakeholders. Like for example here in Tanzania, for a corporate to be registered, there is a specific basic body that registers, these corporates and what they do, and the consequences to the environment and things like that. So I think also the policies have to address clearly and to not like beat around the bush. Like if a corporate wants to introduce something or wants to introduce, a company that works on something in the community, then they have to address sincerely about the environmental impact, climate change impact in order to let them know. If that is going to affect the local community, then I think they have the power to say no. This cannot be registered. This cannot be done in our country because we are cautious, or we have a high risk of climate change in the country happening, or we have this and that going on, so we do not want to increase carbon emission in our own country. So I think the government also has power to do that. And as much as the consumer also have the power, together if we do that, or if we address the government to do that and to take that into accountability, I think these are the things that the government needs to address, but also the people in the country need to address.
I very much agree, and what the government can do is what they're talking about here, that they put a tax on the emission. And but you still need the information to the consumers that they need to pay more for this product here because there's a lot more emission. So the information has to go hand in hand with legislation for CO2 tax.
So I want to leave time for people to ask questions. So I'll just ask a final question to both of you. You can answer very briefly about just maybe your final thoughts on how we can act on climate justice instead of just theorize about it. Would one of you? Happy, would you like to start?
Okay, perfect. I'll start. I think it's time for everybody to work, and I'm really excited that everybody's here. Like, I believe everybody who is in this room, I'm not in that room, but I believe everybody who is in that particular room right now is passionate about climate change. So I know this means we're in a joint movement to help the local communities, have that climate justice in their own communities. So what I'd like to encourage everyone is that we should continue working together, but also continue to learn so much, because each and every day, I can say the impacts of climate crisis are changing. We should keep on changing our knowledge, our skills, and see how best we can, go together with that in order to help our local communities. The farther I go deep into knowing what climate justice is and climate change is. Right now, I know that there are policies, and these policies need to keep being renovated, need to keep being updated because of how the climate impacts are happening. There are projects going on, but then these projects have to have that 360 degree of solving the challenges in the local community. For example, we talk about, the people who have like undergone the crisis, like the people who are involved, let's say, in the floodings or the drought situation, these people have relatives who have lost, and these people have lost their own relatives, their loved ones, and these people have, because of that loss, they're likely to go through mental health issues, including depression, anxiety. So I think as much as we are working for, the climate change issues, in addressing the impact, it's better to also work on the mental health aspect of the victims of the climate change issues. So I think as far as we're moving forward, challenges are coming and going. I think we should also try to re-innovate our strategies on how best we can solve the climate crisis. I believe this is our chance.
Thank you. Jesper, do you have a final word?
Well, only a few. Happy has said most of it. I think the most important thing is to talk about it, and talk about what you are doing yourself, and that the life, when you have changed habits and changed your way of life, that it is not a bad way. It's not a bad life. It's a good life. People think that we're going back to Stone Age if we are going through the green transition, but it's not. It's a better world, cleaner air, and much not so much noise, and so it's greener. And just to talk about the transition in a positive way, and I agree that everywhere you can do it. On social media, and talk to politicians, demonstrate, and so on. So we need to fulfill our obligation with be united in this effort. So talk and talk.
Talk.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're doing today. So, and now to give you the chance to speak. Oh, sorry.
I was adding on what you said and what this was saying. I think, if every one of us understands that they also have a chance, a responsibility into making this possible, into fighting against climate change is possible. Sometimes, like what we were speaking of, course, sometimes we would say maybe the government, maybe the people in the global north, maybe all that stuff. We're putting the blame on somewhere else. As much as yes, that is true. Also ourselves, we have the responsibility of actually working towards achieving climate crisis. So we should also put ourselves forward and make sure we work together selflessly, volunteering, serving, helping the community, mobilizing people to achieve that powerful movement from a perspective of climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Thanks to everyone for listening, and a special thanks to our guests, Happy Itros and Jesper Theilgaard. If you want to learn more about what we do, check out our Facebook and Instagram pages. Mellemfolkeligt Samvirke is a Danish NGO that works for a more just and sustainable world, collaborating with global partners worldwide as part of the ActionAid Alliance. Thank you everyone once again for listening, and until next time, goodbye.